Welcome to another episode of the AI Innovators podcast. Today we have with us James Verbus from LinkedIn. James is a senior staff machine learning engineer at LinkedIn. He's been there for 8 years and has had quite the storied career at LinkedIn. James, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Looking at your profile, you started out in particle astrophysics, and then now you've spent 8 years doing machine learning at LinkedIn. That's that's quite the shift. Can you just give a little background on why you ditched astrophysics for machine learning and also about your time at LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a big shift in many ways, and I've been at LinkedIn for 8 years, and as you mentioned before that, I spent almost a decade in astrophysics doing fundamental research to try and understand what dark matter is. So I was building a big detector a mile underground,
Wow.
running it for years and looking at the data and trying to be among the first, to actually detect this missing mass of the universe. And those experiments are big. It's kind of like a startup. It's maybe 100 people. They're 10 years end to end, and you have to do everything. You design it. You raise money. Basically, the leaders of the experiment raise money. You build it, you operate it, you take the data, you write the software, you do the data analysis, you write the papers. So it's a long journey. And I really liked that I got to participate in every part. And in particular, I spent a lot of time actually writing the data processing software, the data analysis, how to handle all the data that was coming out of the experiment and draw conclusions from it. And I had the decision, at the end of my time in grad school, where I said, hey, I could either work on the next generation of this experiment, which is even bigger, it's going to be even more sensitive, but that's another 10 years of doing something similar that I felt I understood, or this was kind of the mid-2010s when data science and machine learning were really taking off, and there were a lot of obvious applications and exciting applications in industry. So I thought, hey, I think I'm going to make the choice where I have more options going forward and can learn a lot of new things and have a bit of a steep learning curve. So that's how I made the switch. And I would say there's actually some thread that is common between the dark matter work I was doing in physics and the work at LinkedIn I do now in trust and anti-abuse. And it may seem odd, but actually in both cases, it's looking for rare events. So whether you're building a big detector and you run it for a year and there's all sorts of signals in your detector, hundreds of millions, and you're looking for just a few dark matter signals in this ocean of hundreds of millions of background noise. A lot of the same concepts and ideas and outlier detection techniques we thought about there can actually translate to looking for abuse on a big social network. So, for example, if you have 1 billion plus users and they're all active on your platform, and you're looking for a very small percentage of abuse, you can kind of see how it starts to look similar. There's this big ocean of normal user behavior, and you're looking for the flotsam and jetsam, these rare abusive accounts. So I do like to think of it that way. As actually I've stapled that type of work.
Wow. Yeah, I was about to say that you went from actual dark matter to dark matter on social media, and that's to the extent of what I understood. But it's fascinating. I'm a big proponent of LinkedIn, so are millions of people around the world, and like from the outset, as a general user of LinkedIn and other social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all of those, it definitely seems, at least from to the naked eye, that abuse and fraud on LinkedIn is a lot less than you would see on other social media platforms because of the inbuilt behavior of users who are actually there. Is that sort of true, or do you still see, to what extent do you see abuse on LinkedIn?
Well, I'm happy to hear. I mean, that means we're doing a good job, the org I'm in. So happy to hear it. I think it is a hard problem, and just to kind of summarize, the org I work in detects all types of abuse and trust issues across LinkedIn. So it's could be things like finding and removing fake accounts, or preventing your account from being hacked, or detecting if it is hacked in the rare case that happens, and preventing locking out the bad actor and getting your account back to you. It's detecting abusive automated activity, so like scripted scams or spam, and then of course also doing things like moderating content, so text, images, videos in the feed. There's all sorts of policies about what's professional, and how can you enforce those with machine learning and AI. And then of course also, how do we, as the world transitions into the Gen AI future, how do we think about trust there as well? And so it's very heterogeneous, and that's one of the reasons I've stayed for 8 years. There's always exciting work to do across this landscape.
Yeah, and exciting, and also we're very thankful to the work that your team is doing to keep LinkedIn free of abuse. In your view, now that we've got AI tools in the hands of the consumers, many consumers, what are the most pressing ethical challenges that you see today when it comes to AI generated content, or AI generated content on social media platform like LinkedIn?
Yeah, so there's a few ways I think about it, about how AI intersects with abuse and trust, just broadly in the industry. And one way you can think about it is trust for AI. So this is building safeguards into AI systems to prevent abuse. So that could be things like, how do you do moderation of what the LLM inputs and the LLM outputs, apply policies to make sure people can't ask for abusive, the model to do abusive things, or how do you make sure the model doesn't accidentally say something that's outside the policy that you want for your product? That relatedly, there's things like red teaming. So, after you train your model, how do you validate that it's going to, not do something that is untrustworthy or with the reputation of your business. And one thing that I've worked personally on a lot at LinkedIn, and we've been able to publish a few papers on, is detecting some of this AI generated content, specifically some of the images. So that's all in the trust. How do you apply trust to AI? But you can also think of the intersection of trust and AI as AI for trust. So this is, if you have a trust team that is using machine, trying to detect fake accounts or abusive bot activity or hacked accounts, how do you use AI to do that better? So it's not necessarily putting guardrails on AI systems, but there's all these other trust issues potentially on the internet, and how do you use AI to do that more effectively? So I think there's a lot of opportunities with traditional ML systems, and then also with the new Gen AI advancements we've seen too there. And finally, it's not just not just the good guys that are thinking about how to use AI and how that impacts us, but AI is also used for abuse by bad actors. So they are very sophisticated. They often have financial incentives to do scams, for example, on the internet. And they want to make realistic looking profiles, engage with humans, and try and they have some financial incentive to do this. So they are quick to adopt new technologies to be better at doing their abuse. So
there's the AI that your team uses to actually weed out bad actors and abuse within the system. Then there's the other side of AI, which is the AI that bad actors themselves use to, fool the general public, or actually, turn LinkedIn into a graveyard of bot generated content. And then there's the other aspect of AI, which is LinkedIn itself, right? So LinkedIn rolls out a new feature, right? Like where you can go in and use AI to enhance something that you're posting. There's also the general distrust of people using AI to create content, and then general distrust of people looking at AI generated content and consuming that. Like, do you think is part of that because AI and machine learning models are not easily explainable to the general public?
Yeah, I mean, so I think explainability is always important. People want to understand, where this information is coming from, whether it's correct or not. Famously, these models hallucinate, and there's some question on reliability there. And I think also some of it is definitely, it's new, and I think people are afraid broadly in the world of the impact that it's going to have on humans. So for example, if you see self-driving cars around, you may think, hey, how is this going to impact? I like to drive cars. How is this going to impact me? Or I drive vehicles for a living. What's going to happen there? If you create media, music, or write, if you write articles, I think there's a natural interest in, hey, how is this going to affect those industries? But one thing that I think is optimistic is this technology is also going to unlock an explosion of enabling people to be creative. So one example we already see definitely is with people that are coding. So you'll talk to people and they'll say, hey, I'm an ML engineer and I've developed some demo or some side project, or I've got some ideas, and I created an end-to-end. I created the UI, I created this website, I created the full stack that was needed, and I didn't even need to code. I didn't need to learn some of the other things I didn't know in software engineering. I'm able to focus on the part that I really am an expert in, and innovate there, and then in just hours or days use AI to be much more productive. So I think that's exciting. And I think that's going to happen in other areas too, right? So like if you kind of similar to what we see with podcasts, actually, right? A decade or 15 years ago, there wasn't this opportunity for any person to go and create a podcast about content they're interested in, get ability. The best ones kind of rise to the surface, the ones that people want to listen to. Anyone in their basement can do it. And we've seen this proliferation of just really high quality content made by people that otherwise wouldn't necessarily have access to be able to do that. And I think you can imagine a world where that happens for books, because these tools can help people write books. Maybe they have the ideas, but they don't have the time, or they can help them focus and create the outlines and the content. It can help people make music. I think people are going to be using these tools to create music in their basements, and we'll see, lots of interesting things there. Or maybe short videos and movies. You could imagine there's going to be people that use tools. They have ideas for this, and they're going to be able to do it with themselves or with a small team, where previously you needed a lot of resources to be able to do something like that. So I think we might see some unlocking of creativity of people that otherwise weren't able to get those opportunities.
That's true. This podcast is one of those examples. I've always wanted to do one back in previous companies, but today my whole podcast production process involves a lot of AI tools, which means that it's just a single person operation, and I can just turn around everything from video editing to everything, all the content that's created for the podcast, the branding, noise cancellation, right? Like clearing out the voices. I do everything with the AI pipeline using 2 or 3 tools, and I could never have imagined that back in the days. And yeah, same way, right? I think Salad we're sponsoring a project called Project Odyssey. It's actually happening in San Francisco in March. It's an AI filmmaking competition, and we're gonna have the best of the filmmakers or best of technologists come in and make short movies, short films, 5 minutes, I think, or 1 minute or 10 minutes, fully with AI tools, AI generated movies, and that's going to be a competition. So yeah, 5-10 years down the line, like the Cannes Film Festival, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a larger AI film festival. I want to touch on the one thing that you mentioned, explainability, right? Do you think explainable systems to the general public actually make it worse because now they know how complicated and how unpredictable the underlying models in AI are. Right? Like for example, when we get on an airplane, I don't think most of the general public knows what keeps an airplane up in the air. We just get on it blindly and we fly it because there's an inherent trust in the people who designed the system. So do you think that's explainability can also make things worse in terms of mass adoption?
That's a good question. I mean, I think transparency is important, and being able to explain. And I think maybe there's opportunities for the industry and for researchers to develop better ways of explaining the decisions these systems make. And I think that'll help increase trust in the long run. You definitely don't want the systems to be not explainable, black boxes that nobody knows. They go to it, it answers their questions, and nobody knows how or why, whether it's correct or not. And I think there's a few ways that you can help these systems can earn trust or prove that they should be trustworthy. And for things like LLMs, I had mentioned in the Trust for AI, being able to do input and output moderation, where you put guardrails around the model, and for your product, you say, hey, this is what it should be allowed to say, what it shouldn't be allowed to say. And that should be customized, right? Different groups of people, different countries, different companies, different products inside your company probably have different requirements there and different needs and different views. And so it should be flexible and allow people to, customize it for their own use. I think another way you can help to improve trust is, doing validation and red teaming of these models to really show that the way they perform is within the expectations. And there's probably interesting opportunities for how you communicate that and be transparent. But you can kind of say like, hey, if you want to quantify how often the models hallucinate, or I think one of the exciting areas we could talk about too is, as we go from individual models, which people have been doing a lot of thought about how to put guardrails and apply policies and do red teaming and validation and curate input data to make sure, improve the input data that you train the model on to make the performance better and more trustworthy. People are kind of figuring that out now. It's still, that's been an active area of focus. I think it'll be interesting as we go towards agents, which are, a hot topic now. And as you have these agents that are more and more automating tasks for you, they're making phone calls, or they're sending emails, or they're ordering things, or they're, getting quotes from a number of different vendors and making the decision for you. And that adds a lot of complexity. And there's a lot of, the models fetching information from the internet. They're actually doing actions. They're reflecting back and improving their behaviors and responses. And I think there's going to be an opportunity to think about, hey, how do we trust that? Like, there's the difference between trusting just a model and saying, okay, we've got this model we've trained. How do we red team it, validate it, make sure it performs as we expect? And looking at an end-to-end agentic product and all of the different circumstances it could run into as it acts as your assistant out in the world, maybe even without you in the loop. And then how can you simulate, create an environment where you simulate all sorts of different inputs and situations that we may have to deal with and validate it that way. And I think those types of frameworks are going to be important. And if you can do that and then show, here are the results, and we really understand that this performs within the band of acceptable performance, I think that can help convince people as well.
Yeah. Wow. The amount of work that goes into something as simple as an AI agent, it's mind blowing. Just listening to experts like you talk about what actually goes into making sure that you cover all different scenarios, because an AI agent on a website, for example, could possibly be used by thousands and thousands of people, and everyone's behavior is different. Just just in the last month, I've had at least two AI agents that I was talking to on some websites, and then I gave up and I picked up my phone and called the customer support line, and I waited for 10 minutes, right? Like, so it's the when the behavior is so varied, it's yeah, I can imagine what a challenge that must be. Now, in terms of data, you mentioned data and the data that feeds into the systems. That's where trust begins, is in making sure that you're bringing in data that's good, you're bringing in data that's trustworthy. But there's also this, at least in the last year or two, there's also this new wave of platforms that have come out where, for example, X famously said what actually qualifies to be something that's banned on the platform or something that's going to be prohibited on the platform has now been, shrunk. There's a lot more that's being allowed on the platform that wasn't allowed before. Now we're seeing platforms come out with, specific political ideologies, specific, platforms that are curated on data pertaining to specific things. It almost feels like we haven't even reached a point where all of us can agree on, hey, what is actually good, trustworthy data? How do you tackle that? Is it very platform specific?
That's a great question, and so this is my personal opinion on this. I think that is why we need these tools for data curation and guardrails and red teaming and simulation to understand and constrain the behavior of these models and agents to be very customizable, because humans just don't agree. Like, as I was mentioning, like some groups have some values and some views, and I think they should be able to create their products and models fit their beliefs, and I think others have different beliefs. And like, what you want to do is enable people to apply the policies that make sense for them and their product, or their laws in their country, and there's diversity there.
Got it. So now we can clone voices, we can clone faces, we can, LLMs can be trained on your tone. So it feels like we're almost at a point where your online behavior, everything that someone is doing online, speaking, you're typing, your facial expressions, everything can be deepfaked or everything can be duplicated with AI, right? Like, so then have we reached a point where it's out of our control to fight with automated detection systems? Because what's the difference between me making a AI avatar of myself and someone else doing it, right? Like, how do you balance out? Like, is it Prashant's profile and I'm posting something from my profile that's an AI avatar of myself, or someone else doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is adversarial. So this kind of goes back to the folks using, like, bad actors using AI for abuse, and they're quick to take advantage of technological improvements and use it in their efforts. And it's an arms race. They will always try to navigate the defenses that people put, just like we've seen, for example, in fraud space for decades. Right? Fraud. There's all sorts of fraud prevention technologies that financial institutions use, and there's those that try to circumnavigate them, and they get more and more sophisticated in their attempts. The same happens in scams and other types of abuse. I will say that it depends on the type of content. So for text alone can be particularly hard, even if you're using AI to try and detect it, because there just isn't that much information. If you have a few sentences of text, it's very hard to say definitively, even if you have AI to look at it, hey, this is a AI generated text, or this is a human that wrote it. They're just, it's not that much information in a few sentences. As the models get more and more real, better and better, they'll lose some of the weird patterns, artifacts that kind of give you the sense, hey, this sounds a bit AI generated. So I think that's hard, although there may be some other solutions there. For images, we've done a lot of work on this on my team, And we have, production models to look at profile photos and detect AI generated profile photos. And we've been able to publish a few papers on this as well. And when we first started that, it was not obvious. I talked to other folks in the industry at other companies, and this was, 2019, back when the first AI generated photos with GANs were hitting the scene, and also face swaps. Like they were very rudimentary at the time, but it was the face swap videos, but they looked pretty bad. But they've gotten a lot better. And opinions were mixed on like, hey, is this possible to detect well enough to stop? And are we going to be able to keep up? Because the generators are going to keep getting better, and are we always going to be a step or two behind, and we're not able to keep up with the latest generation techniques? So far, it's proven to be the case that actually for images we can detect them very well. There's actually research. We have a collaborator at UC Berkeley, and his group done research showed even a few years ago, for GAN generated facial photos, humans off the street are no better than random. So you can show like a data set of 50-50 real human photos, headshots, and then AI generated photos. Humans off the street, they might as well be guessing. If you train them, maybe they become 60% accurate. So you know, with some amount of training what to look for. They're still not great at it. The models that we use to detect AI generated photos do much, much better. They can detect basically almost all of them, very high percentage, high 90%, and almost never making a mistake. And so far we've been able to maintain that. But one thing you do have to do is, as there are new generation techniques, you have to get examples of them and feed them into your training data for your model and update the model to keep up with the latest and greatest generation. So that's what we've been doing, and we've been able to do it well enough to help protect our members. And what we see is fake accounts using this. So if you wanted to do some type of abuse at scale on a social network or professional network, you want to make your accounts look as real as possible. And what we saw very quickly is, for images, what you'd want is an unlimited source of professional-looking headshot photos that are diverse and unique. So you can't do, for example, a reverse image search and find, hey, this profile image doesn't match what I see. This is a stock image, or it's used for someone else's profile. You shouldn't be able to do a reverse image. It needs to be unique. So that's why data actors latched onto these AI-generated photos very quickly and started using them. So actually, within weeks of the first style GAN coming out in February 2019, we saw them start to appear. Created our interest in detecting these.
Got it. And yeah, if I read both of your papers. Obviously, a lot of it went over my head because I'm not a machine learning engineer. But yeah, I did read it. I have a little bit of engineering background. I read it, and one thing that I found interesting was just the comparison between the different models. And one, obviously, the image quality, varies across models, but also just the proliferation of models and just trying to keep up with a new model or newer enhancements coming up all the time. Right? You mentioned that you had trained models internally to do the detection job, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about the scale and complexity of what it actually takes to train a model to do this sort of AI-generated photo detection? And also just interested to know a little bit more about the models themselves, right? Like, are there open source models that are good at it, or is this something that you have to do proprietary? And then, like, what's the kind of infrastructure that's powering these?
Yep. Yeah. So we published two papers that I can talk about. So one was in 2013 at the workshop on media forensics at CVPR, and then one was 2014 at the same venue. And we talked about two different models. So the 2013 paper was actually a very simple model, and it was kind of a novel.
Did you mean 2023, or was this
2023?
Okay. Yeah.
Good. catch things. Um, the 2023 was a simple model, and we wanted it there that only focused on GAN generated photos, which are, much more constrained. They look very good, but it's basically face generation only. And in that case, we wanted to show, hey, you can actually do something relatively simple and still get really good performance. And we had some kind of clever tricks that we used in the modeling approach there, but they were very lightweight. In fact, we showed some of the variants of our approach didn't even require deep learning, and then we showed we could do a bit better if we used some deep learning as well. But we did well. But the 2024 paper, so that was this year, actually talked about a prior generation of what we actually use in production. So this is a much higher bar for performance, not just academic interest. It was actually, hey, we used to use this, and it did really well across all of these different types of AI-generated photos, not just GAN, but also diffusion, like Stable Diffusion, DALL-E, Midjourney. And that approach did leverage sort of open models. So there's some great large CNNs that are available that you can download and fine tune for your purposes. And we leveraged one of those. So they're already like a general purpose image understanding models. And then what we do is fine tune it based on our proprietary data sets. And that's where we really got the advantage of, all of the profile images we have. So we have so many good examples. So that was helpful from LinkedIn. And then we also, with our collaborator at Berkeley, Hani Farid, we generated all of these synthetic examples. And so we had a very diverse set of profile photos generated with many GAN-based techniques, many diffusion-based techniques, and we were able to fine-tune there. And I think, so the data quality and volume was critical to getting these great results that we had. And also, I think we had the benefit of focusing very specifically on one type of problem. So it's, professional-looking profile photos. I think if you want to have a general purpose detector, that may be harder. And I think we were able to get really, really great state-of-the-art performance because we said, hey, we can do really well at this problem that is the actual business problem we care about, and let's focus and constrain our efforts there. So I think those were the two advantages that we had.
Got it. And then the infrastructure part, right? Like, is this sort of thing something that's computationally, does it require a lot of compute? What stages are these models running, right? Like, for example, if I'm a bad actor and I'm creating fake profiles, whether I'm automated or manually, the minute I upload an image, are you detecting them in the background and saying, if it's proprietary, you need to answer, but yeah, like what stages are you looking for these bad actors, and do you have different stages and gates where these models run? And someone passes to the first one, then you catch them again at the next stage.
Yeah, so I can't go into too much detail, but we'll say that broadly, we have an ecosystem of anti-abuse defenses. This AI-generated photo detection model is one of many, and we use many signals. We use behavioral signals. We use clustering. We use activity, which is some prior work I've done and have been able to speak publicly about, which is like looking at the sequence of activities that members do and identifying automated or abusive sequences. And those models run at all stages. So, some could be synchronous, where in real time, they're looking at activities or and identifying patterns of abuse and taking action. Some could be near real time. So they are maybe able to still catch things quickly, but they can use a little bit more information because they're running in a streaming fashion, not synchronously. And then some use a lot of data and maybe run in some batch mode. And they can run every hour or every day or over long time and leverage a lot of data. And basically it's commonly used in kind of infosec, but also actually I think it comes from like military strategy. There's a concept called defense in depth, which is what this is.
Mm-hmm.
You have many layers of defenses that use different signals. There's different time scales and advantages. So the holistic ecosystem of abuse defense has a high chance of catching the bad activity.
Got it. This is such a fascinating conversation so far, because it's not something that an average user thinks about every day, right? Like, it's very easy for us to, as a user, just come in and go, well, I saw an AI generated comment 3 times today. And so obviously your team is, LinkedIn's dropping the ball. But yeah, it definitely feels like I mentioned earlier. And I'm speaking for a lot of professionals, because I do know a lot of marketers who use LinkedIn very religiously. And the difference between LinkedIn and other platforms is chalk and cheese when it comes to just seeing AI generated content and abuse. Now, one thing you mentioned was the profile photo detection, right? Like, what about the AI profile photo makers? In the last year, there's been an explosion of them. Sector Labs, I think, yeah, Art Guru, OpenArt, Photo AI. Pretty much, I feel like a lot of the AI image generators now also have an option where I can upload an image of myself, and I can actually upload an AI generated image. Has it muddied the waters now with respect to photo detection, and how do you make the distinction? Is it based on user behavior?
That's a great question. So I related to what you were mentioning about, hey, it's LinkedIn does in your view a good job of this. Like, one of the things we always have to balance is and we take it really seriously, is you want to catch the abuse, but you don't want any negative impact on good members. You don't want your account to be a false positive and correctly flagged.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a very, very high standard for making sure we're able to catch the abuse, but not impact, and make a mistake. One of the things we were concerned about with these AI generated profile photo models in production is, hey, are we going to have false positives as people use AI tools to make avatars of themselves or beautify their profile photo, or take a vacation photo and then use a tool to translate it into a professional headshot, which those tools exist now too. And what we've seen is that the approach we use really does a really good job for generators that were included in the training data. So like, we can be very specific about, hey, we want to detect these types of AI generated photos, but not AI augmented photos that are still you. And we monitor it closely. So we monitor like any mistakes the model makes over time to make sure that we're not incorrectly catching people that are just using tools to beautify their photos. So far that's worked well for us. And the other thing I would mention is, it's kind of a policy question too at that point. So on LinkedIn, we have the benefit of, your photo has to be your likeness. So you can't upload it's not someone else. You can't upload something that's not your, a photo of your face. So if it's a completely synthetic photo that's not you, that's not acceptable. But if it's an AI photo that is beautifying you, then that's a legitimate use.
I like the distinction, because yeah, we have. I think at Salad, one of our strong suits is a lot of text to image companies run on Salad Cloud, and oftentimes I see AI image generation and AI profile picture companies just come in there. They use Dreambooth and other sort of training to do it. I personally use those as well. I'm a big fan of those, but yeah, it's good to know that we can continue safely using those without getting our profile dinged for using AI photos. And then I know we're coming up on time. One last question was just switching gears here. You've been a mentor, 8 years at LinkedIn. You've been a mentor for many engineers, and I've also seen that you've actually helped engineers not just upskill, but also get promoted and all that. But with the heavy competition these days, right? Like, what should ML engineers look to improve on in order to get promoted at work, and what are some of the things that they should work to eliminate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's been one of the really satisfying parts of my time at LinkedIn is growing new leaders and helping them get scope and helping them get promoted, as you say, and also learn and have get able to do some interesting work too. So I think fundamentally AI engineers and ML engineers, their goal is really to use data and code to solve business problems. So, and I think that's where they can uniquely provide value, is like leveraging data to solve these problems in kind of an automated way. So it can be ML, it can be AI, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. And so I think I would focus on like, hey, what are the business problems that my team or the company cares about that aren't getting solved well? And are there techniques that I'm aware of? They could be existing techniques or could be cutting edge things that, kind of answer the why now we're going to solve that problem. And like, how can I apply them? How can I take what exists in the world and apply it to solve this problem? So I think that should be the mindset. And then there's a tendency for AI engineers to maybe be a little too focused on cutting edge AI solutions. Like they want to do the most cutting edge modeling and get very theoretical. And there can be a place for that, but only when necessary, only when there's a real problem you need to solve and that's the right solution. And, you feel you have a high probability of solving it that way. So I would focus more on the impact and less on the need to like do the cutting edge thing. I think that, one thing junior people often need to improve on is being able to communicate the results, like they need to be able to tell the story of, why when they're proposing a solution, what the problem is that everybody sees and acknowledges, and then how they think they can solve it and what the impact will be. I think to get buy-in is an area that often, requires some coaching there. And then also once they succeed, people can often be maybe too modest or not go on road shows about the success they've had, not communicated broadly. And I think that's important because otherwise people won't know. So like being able to internally at your company communicate the benefits and the impact you've had, and hopefully evangelize, and maybe some of the work you've done can then be used by others in the company too. And that's like additional. One way I think of it is being T-shaped. So like, and I've done this throughout my career, and I try to encourage others is, there's certain problems that require you going very deep. So that's like the vertical part of the T, whether that's developing AI generated photo detection, that's kind of a researchy depth, technical depth area, or whether it's building the activity sequence technology we briefly talked about from like 0 to 1 and figuring out this is a possibility, building MVPs, showing that that's a good solution. Like there's opportunities for that. But I think people should also focus on the top of the T, which is kind of how do you do things horizontally? How do you up-level your team? How do you run initiatives that maybe are not like going really deeply, but you're having a big impact by changing the processes, changing the technologies that your team uses, running initiatives that can, have a lasting impact in the way your team does things. And that might not be cutting edge AI stuff, but it could be just like hugely impactful. And I think it's good to try and do a bit of both, during your career.
That's very, very helpful advice for a lot of junior ML engineers out there. James, thanks for an absolutely fascinating conversation. Obviously, LinkedIn has millions of fans, self-included, and all of us are very, very thankful for the work that your team's been doing with making LinkedIn a safe, welcoming platform and a trustworthy platform for all of us. So yeah, thank you for a great conversation.
Thanks for the invitation, Prashant and Salad. Really, really enjoyed the conversation and have been thrilled to be here.